what if I told you that the games we play just for fun have accidentally become some of the most powerful laboratories for understanding the human mind? Yeah, for decades, they've been running these massive, unintentional experiments on everything from how we act in a society to how our brains literally change shape. And they're revealing some really surprising and sometimes pretty unsettling truths about who we are. So let's dive in and see what these virtual worlds have actually taught us.
Imagine this. It's 2005, you log into the massive online game World of Warcraft, and you see this exact scene. It wasn't some planned in-game event. Oh no, it was a glitch. A digital plague that escaped its quarantine and, completely by accident, created one of the most revealing psychological experiments of the 21st century.
So this event became known as the corrupted blood incident, and it's now legendary among epidemiologists. Why? Because it showed in real time how millions of actual thinking, feeling humans, not just numbers in a computer model, behave when a deadly outbreak hits.
And the spread, it was terrifyingly fast. What started as a tiny bug in a remote, high-level area just spiraled out of control. Within a few hours, the game's biggest cities were basically virtual graveyards. The game developers tried to set up voluntary quarantines, but that failed completely. The only way they could stop it was to pull the plug, a hard reset of the entire game world.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. This whole event showed this massive gap between the neat, tidy scientific models and, well, messy human reality. You see, the models assume we're all rational people who will try to avoid getting sick, but in Warcraft, players did the exact opposite. Some ran towards the plague just to see what was going on, and others, in this really chilling preview of bioterrorism, would get infected on purpose and then teleport to a clean city just to spread it.
The truly remarkable thing is that this virtual plague predicted with stunning accuracy the exact kinds of behaviors we would all see years later during real-world pandemics like COVID-19. It showed us that sometimes curiosity is a more powerful motivator than self-preservation. It showed that, yep, some people will act maliciously. And it proved that without real, enforced restrictions, voluntary measures just don't stand a chance against individual choices.
Okay, so the virtual pandemic showed us what we do in a crisis. But what happens when there are no rules at all? Video games have also become these incredible laboratories for one of philosophy's oldest questions.
You know the debate, right? Is life without government, like the philosopher Thomas Hobbes said, just nasty, brutish, and short, or are we all fundamentally good, like Rousseau argued, and it's society that corrupts us? For centuries, this was just a thought experiment, but then online worlds came along and let us actually run the test.
So, in an early game called Ultima Online, the developers created this beautiful, self-sustaining world. But the game's reward system encouraged players to act less like residents and more like, well, a swarm of locusts. It became a perfect and very fast illustration of the tragedy of the commons. Within just a few days, players had hunted every single animal to extinction, completely collapsing the food chain, all because getting individual rewards was more important than any sense of collective good. But if you want an even more extreme example, you have to look at 2B2T. It's a Minecraft server with zero rules. I mean zero. No admins, no bans. You can cheat, you can steal, you can destroy anything you want. The world itself is this scarred, brutal wasteland from years of digital war. New players are often hunted down the second they log in. It is, for all intents and purposes, a digital state of nature.
But here's the twist. Even in that total, absolute chaos, order begins to form. Far away from the chaos of the starting area, players form these massive clans that basically act like little proto-nations. They build these incredible cities, they enforce their own rules, their own borders, and they protect their territory with a vengeance. So it turns out Hobbes was only half right. The initial state is brutal for sure, but humans will almost immediately start to form tribes and create their own rules to protect the things they've built and value.
So, we've seen how games can reveal our social instincts, but what are they actually doing to our brains on a physical level? You know, for a long time, the thinking was that the adult brain was pretty much fixed, but video games help prove that idea is profoundly wrong.
Just take a look at this. In a landmark study from the Max Planck Institute, one group of adults played Super Mario 64 for 30 minutes a day. The result? As you can see in that first bar, they showed significant growth in gray matter. Now look at the control group in the second bar. Over the same 2 months, their brains showed the slight decline that's typical with aging. The gamers didn't just stop the decline, they literally reversed it.
And this is a really crucial point,
not all games are created equal. The best way to think about it is like a diet. Complex 3D games like Mario or big strategy games are like brain superfoods. They build up the hippocampus, which is essential for things like spatial memory. On the other hand, really simple, reflexive shooters can be more like junk food. They tend to over-rely on the brain's habit center instead of building more flexible cognitive pathways. The type of game you play really matters.
So knowing that games can physically change our brains, researchers started asking a really powerful question. Could we start using them on purpose? Could a video game actually be a form of medicine?
This is one of the most incredible discoveries to come out of this field. So after a traumatic event, our brains have about a 6-hour window to really lock that memory in. The horrible, intrusive flashbacks that come with PTSD are super visual. Well, it turns out that if a person plays a visually demanding game like Tetris within that 6-hour window, the game basically hijacks the brain's visual processing. There just isn't enough mental bandwidth left to record that traumatic image in high definition.
Researchers have a name for this. They call it a cognitive vaccine. Now, it doesn't erase the memory of what happened, but it can dramatically reduce one of the absolute worst symptoms of PTSD. And studies in emergency rooms have shown that this super simple, low-cost intervention is remarkably effective.
And this isn't just a theory anymore. This is happening. In 2020, the FDA approved Endeavor RX, which was the first ever prescription video game. It's a regulated medical device designed specifically to treat ADHD in kids. And the clinical trials were amazing. After just 4 weeks, nearly 3/4 of the kids showed measurable improvements in their attention. The active ingredient isn't a molecule in a pill, it's the game's carefully designed algorithm.
So this brings us to this really profound ethical choice we're now facing. If we can design games to intentionally change our psychology, to literally change our brains, well, what kind of world should we be building? What are we even optimizing for? On the one hand, you have tools like SuperBetter. It was designed by Jane McGonigal after she suffered a really severe concussion. She literally turned her recovery into a game which reframed her role from being a passive victim of her injury into the active hero of her own story. It's just a powerful example of using game mechanics to build psychological resilience and empower people.
But then there's the other side of the coin, the cautionary tale of Magnasanti. This was a city built by a player in the game SimCity 3000. He set out to build the perfect city, optimizing every single metric for maximum efficiency. And the result? It was a totalitarian nightmare. A city of 6 million people, yeah, but with zero crime, because it was an absolute police state. Total efficiency, but no one could ever leave their block, and life expectancy was artificially capped at 50 just to keep the workforce cycling efficiently. It was a functional hell.
Ultimately, Magnasanti is this giant flashing warning sign for our modern world. So many of our digital platforms, from social media to the games we play, are designed to optimize for just one metric, engagement. And when a system is designed to maximize a number without any regard for human well-being, that system becomes psychopathic in practice.
And that leaves us with the essential question, doesn't it? As these technologies get more and more powerful, more integrated into every part of our lives, we have to decide what we're building. Are we designing systems that empower us, that build our resilience and unlock our potential? Or are we building these perfectly optimized digital cities that are, in reality, just prisons for the human spirit? The choice is ours.